Harriet Wickfield prided herself on her sharp needlework, steady hands, and impeccable attention to detail. Living in the quaint coastal town of Clover Cove, she ran Wickfield Stitches and Sensibility, a warm and cozy tailor shop nestled between a bakery and a small bookstall. Chimes dangling outside her front door jingled whenever someone came in, and Harriet never failed to greet her customers with a friendly smile. In return, the townsfolk entrusted her with all manner of garments, from everyday uniforms to once-in-a-lifetime wedding gowns. One quiet Monday morning, Harriet unlocked her shop's door just as the faint smell of baking bread wafted down the street. She flipped the closed sign to open, letting in a gentle breeze that ruffled the lace curtains framing her window display. Although Clover Cove had the usual hum of small-town gossip, Harriet kept herself focused on the threads and fabrics in her care, content to let trivial rumors pass her by. She had always found the intricacy of a garment far more intriguing than any bit of whispered speculation. The day promised no more than a few alterations, a rather large quilt repair, and perhaps some leisurely hand embroidery if time permitted. A single garment waited for her on the dress form in the back. Harriet turned on the overhead lights, causing the rhinestones of the gown to wink at her. Its silhouette was timeless praise length sleeves, a cinched waist, and a full skirt layered with organza. Filmy silver lace trimmed the neckline, giving it a quiet elegance. She'd been given no instructions yet on whose gown this was, or where it came from. It had arrived during her usual half-day Sunday closure, left anonymously on her doorstep in a sealed garment bag. Harriet approached the dress, running her fingers lightly over the shimmering fabric. She immediately recognized that while the design was exquisite, the seams had come loose in places, and the lining bore tears near the waist. The label had been cut out, leaving no hint of the dressmaker's name or origin. She wondered who would bring in a gown of such quality yet remain so secretive. The only note attached said, "Please make it new again." The scrawled handwriting bore no name. She took the gown to her work table, carefully unzipping the back and inspecting the interior structure. The outer shell had survived well, but the inner lining needed substantial repair. As Harriet gently teased a loose thread along the seam, she felt something unusual beneath the lining. A slight bump. With nimble fingers, she reached inside the small tear to investigate. Her fingertips brushed what felt like a folded piece of paper or cloth. Leaning in closer, Harriet found a narrow opening in the gown's hem where the stitching had come undone. Inside that narrow channel, she discovered a single envelope. Concern flared. Had she stumbled upon something private? The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with a faint red wax imprint, though the imprint had cracked with age. She paused, wrestling with her conscience. This clearly didn't belong to her, but had the owner intended to hide it? Or had it been forgotten? She'd never encountered a hidden letter before. With trembling hands, Harriet carefully worked the envelope free and stared at it. Upon its front side, the words, "Dearest Grace," were written in neat cursive. No last name, no clue as to the sender. Should she open it? The doubt made her heart flutter. Then she recalled a principle her mother had taught her. When entrusted with a garment, one must handle it with utmost respect and honesty. She decided to open the letter to see if it was crucial to the gown's repair or if it might guide her to the rightful owner who had left it in her care. Sliding her seam ripper under the brittle wax, Harriet pried open the delicate envelope. Inside lay a single piece of stationery, creased firmly in half. She gently unfolded it and read, "My dearest Grace, tonight meet me under the elm behind the chapel. I can no longer hide my feelings, nor can I abide the arrangement you've been forced into. We must be together. I beg of you, leave him. I will wait for you at midnight, every night until we can be free. Yours always." Harriet's eyes widened. The note clearly spoke of passion, secrecy, and a forbidden love. She examined the signature carefully, but only the lone initial T stood out. Who was T? And Grace, did Harriet know a Grace in town? Clover Cove was small enough that Harriet had likely heard of nearly everyone. Her pulse quickened with an uncharacteristic excitement. Was this truly happening, right here in humble Clover Cove? Or was this note an echo from the past? Conscience prickled. She slid the letter back into its envelope, deciding she should keep it safe until she discovered who owned the gown. She couldn't shake her curiosity, but Harriet told herself she had no business prying further. Yet the letter felt like a gentle knock on a locked door, inviting her to peep through the keyhole. Harriet returned the letter to the hidden compartment and made a neat repair on the small tear, so it would not be further damaged. However, she made a mental note to remove it again once the rightful owner came to claim the dress, just in case it needed returning. The next day dawned bright and mild, the seagulls circling overhead in the harbour next to Clover Cove's short wooden pier. Harriet strolled along the main street, delivering a few finished garments to customers. First, she stopped at the Petal and Shine, the local florist, with a pressed and hemmed shop apron for its owner. Next, she stepped into the post office, dropping off a commissioned set of embroidered handkerchiefs. But all the while, her thoughts drifted to that letter. She admitted to herself that the romance and secrecy made her heart flutter, particularly because Harriet perceived her own life as straightforward and unremarkable. She lived alone in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, took supper by herself, and spent most of her days sewing. The idea that someone had once carried out a clandestine affair in Clover Cove seemed both thrilling and unsettling. She mulled over the time frame. The stationery's edges had a yellowed hue, and the ink's colour had slightly bled in places, suggesting it wasn't recent. Possibly the letter had been hidden away for years. When Harriet finished her deliveries, she decided to do something out of character. She confided in her best friend, Lily Hampton, the town librarian. Lily was not one for gossip, but she had a sharp mind for mysteries and historical details. If anyone could help Harriet discreetly unravel this puzzle, it was Lily. They met in the library's small reading nook, flanked by tall shelves of cloth-bound volumes. Lily offered Harriet a steaming cup of chamomile tea, and Harriet explained how she'd discovered the letter. Lily's brows rose with interest, though she kept her voice calm and measured. "Dearest Grace," Lily repeated. "That's the only name on the letter?" Harriet nodded. "No surname? Just Grace, and the signature initial of T." "Well," Lily said, "I can try searching the library archives. We have old records, newspaper clippings going back decades, family genealogies, even old wedding announcements. Anything referencing Grace might help." "I'll be discreet. I promise." Grateful, Harriet handed Lily the letter to make a quick photocopy. When Lily stepped away, Harriet paced softly along the shelves, inhaling the comforting smell of old pages. Would they find a mention of some scandal from decades before? She half expected that the letter might tie into a prominent Clover Cove family. She thought of the Gilmores, the Bevans, the Hawthorns, long-established families who still carried weight in the community. Lily soon returned, letter and photocopy in hand. "Let me handle this," she said, sliding the letter gently into a protective sleeve. "I'll dig around the archives after closing. Any chance you have leads on who dropped the gown off?" Harriet shook her head. "I didn't see anyone. They left it on Sunday and I was out of town for that afternoon." Together they parted ways with hushed excitement. Harriet tried to quell her anticipation. She reminded herself that the gown's owner might retrieve it any day now, so she needed to be prepared with answers or prepared to diplomatically forget she had ever read that letter. It was a tightrope, balancing caution and curiosity. That evening, Lily called Harriet just after dinner. In a conspiratorial tone, she said, "I found something, but I'm not certain it's related. There was a Grace Montgomery about 30 years ago who married a local fisherman, Todd Montgomery. But there's also a Grace Peterson from even further back. She was rumored to have run off with a traveling performer. I need to investigate more." "Don't get too excited yet. Let me sleep on it." Harriet thanked her and tried not to let her imagination race too far. Maybe T was Todd, or maybe T was someone else who was forced into an arrangement. The letter's reference to "leave him" nagged at Harriet. Someone was trapped in a vow they desperately wanted to break. That notion unsettled her gentle heart. She laid awake for a long time, picturing possible scenarios: a forbidding family forcing Grace into marriage, or a passionate romance cut short by scandal. Morning brought a different kind of hustle to Wickfield's Stitches and Sensibility. Harriet was in the midst of fitting a wedding gown for a young bride named Melinda when, soon after, the bells on the door jingled to admit a new arrival. The door opened for Mrs. Smithers, a short, breezy, older woman who loved to chat. Her presence was quickly followed by another figure, a graceful woman wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed much of her face. Harriet glanced away from the bride to greet them. Mrs. Smithers was prattling on about a missing watch, but Harriet's attention was drawn by the hat-wearing woman who stood behind her, silent and poised. The woman placed a gloved hand on the counter. "Good morning," she said, her voice clipped and reserved. "I'm here to inquire about a gown." Harriet nodded, noticing the subtle tension in the woman's posture. "Certainly. May I ask your name?" The visitor hesitated. "I'd prefer not to say. My garments are rather private. I left a silver lace gown here for repair. I trust you've had time to examine it." Not wanting to alarm or offend this potential customer, Harriet answered calmly, "Yes, I have the gown in the back. Are you the owner, or merely collecting it on someone else's behalf?" "I'm the owner," she replied, her tone more uncertain now that Harriet had asked a direct question. "How soon can the adjustments be done? And did you find anything unusual about the gown?" Harriet caught the slight flicker in the woman's expression and realized the question wasn't asked casually. She felt her heart skip, so the woman clearly knew about the letter. Harriet paused a moment, carefully choosing her words to preserve her professional reputation. "The seam was torn along the hem. I did find something sewn into the lining, an old letter. I have it set aside safely. Would you like it returned to you now or when you pick up the dress?" Mrs. Smithers, idly flipping through a frothy bridal magazine, hardly seemed to register the exchange. Meanwhile, the shapely figure under the hat stiffened, her gloved fingers tensing around her handbag. "I'll collect it when the dress is complete," she said curtly. Then, as if catching herself, she cleared her throat. "How could I have forgotten? I apologize for any inconvenience. When might I pick it up?" Adjusting her tape measure around her neck, Harriet offered a small smile. "I'll need another couple of days to finish the lining properly. Is Thursday acceptable?" "Yes, Thursday is fine," the woman replied. "And please, let's keep this matter entirely confidential." With that, she turned and strode out of the shop, her hat's brim bobbing slightly, leaving Harriet to wonder who among the townsfolk, or perhaps an out-of-towner, could afford such anonymity. That night, Harriet brought Lily up to speed. Lily's excitement bubbled over the phone. What if the woman under the hat is Grace herself? Or maybe a descendant who discovered the secret letter? There must be a reason she wants to keep her identity hidden. "I agree," Harriet replied, "but my instinct says it may not be Grace. She's too young to be the woman from that old rumor. Unless Grace was exceptionally youthful when all this happened. The letter seems older than 30 years, maybe older. Something doesn't add up." Over the next 2 days, Harriet could hardly contain her curiosity. She continued her usual work, but her mind kept drifting. A hush fell over Wickfield's Stitches and Sensibility on Wednesday afternoon after her final appointment for the day. That left Harriet free to sneak a peek at the letter once more. She retrieved it from her locked cabinet, gazing again upon the desperate lines from T. Deep in thought, Harriet recalled a name from her younger years. Thomas Gilmore, known around town as an aristocratic figure who used to sponsor local plays. He had a certain adventurous flair. Could T be Thomas Gilmore? And if so, which Grace had he been pining for? If Harriet's memory served, Thomas had once been in love with the daughter of a wealthy merchant, but something got in the way. That was well before Harriet had even opened her shop. Now, Thomas Gilmore had passed away many years ago, leaving behind a widow who still carried the last name. Thursday arrived. bringing a crisp morning breeze that rustled the leaves on the elm tree behind the old chapel. Harriet eyed that tree on her way to work, thinking of the letter's words, "Meet me under the elm behind the chapel." It made her feel as though she had tapped into a bit of the town's romantic history. The memory of the note gave her slight goosebumps as she unlocked her shop. That afternoon, the mysterious woman returned, still wearing a hat, though today's was smaller, decorated with a cluster of artificial roses. She approached quietly. Having anticipated the visit, Harriet had already wrapped the finished gown in protective plastic and placed the letter in a small envelope so as not to present it openly in the shop. She passed both over the counter discreetly. "It's finished," Harriet said softly. "I believe you'll be happy with the repairs. Here's the letter as well. May I be of any further service?" The woman accepted the gown, glancing down at the envelope Harriet had included. Their eyes met, and Harriet glimpsed a flush of relief and perhaps a trace of embarrassment. "Thank you for your discretion," she murmured. I'm sure you're curious. Everyone here in Clover Cove always is. But I appreciate your willingness to keep this matter to yourself." She hesitated, then turned toward the door. The bells jingled as she stepped outside. Harriet felt half disappointed that the secret was leaving her hands, but also somewhat relieved she wouldn't bear the weight of someone else's private affairs. She presumed that would be the end of it. She returned to her sewing machine and wondered what might have happened all those years ago. But the day wasn't finished surprising her. A few minutes later, before Harriet could even unfold a new garment to work on, the door's chimes jingled again. This time, Lily came rushing inside with a swirl of skirts, excitement bright on her face. "Harriet," she breathed, "you will not believe what I found. It's an engagement notice from about 40 years ago, Grace Hawthorne and Timothy Gilmore. Timothy, he always went by Tim or T. They never married, though. The next mention is of her wedding to a different man a few months later. The local rumor was that Grace's parents forced her to marry someone else for financial reasons." Harriet's eyes widened. "So that's our T, Timothy Gilmore. They must have had a clandestine plan to run away together." "Or so the letter suggests," Lily said. "But she never went to meet him, I suppose. She stayed with the man her parents chose. And there's more. I dug into the Gilmore estate papers. Timothy Gilmore apparently died young in an accident. Grace ended up moving away with her husband. She died only a few years ago in a nursing home upstate." The mention of Grace's passing struck Harriet with a soft pang. All that hidden longing, never realized. So the letter never reached her in time, or maybe she found it and couldn't act on it. The question is, why is it in this gown now? Lily chewed her lip. Perhaps Grace or a family member hid it. Or maybe it was sewn in by someone who didn't want it found. The Gilmores and Hawthorns had quite the complicated relationship. There's a chance a descendant discovered the letter and is trying to piece together the scandal. The woman you described could be one of Grace's children or grandchildren. Harriet's heart twisted with both pity and awe at the fate of the star-crossed lovers. She told Lily how the woman had just claimed the gown and the letter. "It's likely we'll never know the final piece of the puzzle," she finished gently. Lily nodded solemnly, understanding that Harriet's code of privacy would prevent her from chasing leads or pressing the unknown woman for details. "I suppose we'll have to let this remain a secret heartbreak from Clover Cove's past." Thinking that was the end of the discussion, they said their goodbyes. After Lily left, Harriet tried to refocus on her current garments. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't fully let go of the story. She had to know, at least, that everything had turned out all right. Late in the afternoon, she decided to walk down to the harbor. It was her favorite place to reflect. She enjoyed the sight of gulls drifting lazily and the shimmering reflection of tethered fishing boats. To her shock, she spotted the woman with the hat standing on the pier gazing over the water. Propped on the railing beside her was the silver lace gown wrapped in plastic. Harriet approached tentatively, raising a hand in greeting, unsure if she was intruding. The woman turned, startled at first, then exhaled. "I had a feeling you might still be curious," the woman said quietly, removing her hat. A wave of chestnut-brown curls and a pair of discerning brown eyes came into view. She looked to be in her mid-40s with a refined demeanor. "My mother was Grace Hawthorne's niece. I'm Charlotte." Her voice shook slightly. "I found that letter in an old chest of my grandmother's. I suspect it belonged to Aunt Grace. This gown was with it too, though I'm not sure it ever belonged to her. I think it might have been a dress Aunt Grace was to wear when she met Timothy, maybe a symbol that never came to pass." Harriet listened, sympathy welling up. Charlotte looked off across the waves. "Mother told me bits and pieces about how Aunt Grace was forced to marry someone of her parents' choosing, how she always carried a quiet sadness. When I came across that letter, I wanted answers. I hoped that hidden inside the dress there might be a clue. Or maybe I just wanted to preserve that moment in time, the what if. But the gown needed repair, so I brought it to you, anonymously, because, well, it felt so personal. I was afraid I wouldn't have the courage to see it through if I revealed too much." Harriet gently placed a hand on Charlotte's arm. "I'm sorry for the heartbreak your aunt endured. I wish that letter had reached her at the right time. I'm sure you needed closure." Slowly, Charlotte nodded. "Learning about her story made me see how fleeting love can be. I'm hoping to keep this gown as a reminder to treasure the love and life I do have. Aunt Grace never broke free. She was too scared, or too dutiful. I can't judge her for that." Harriet glanced at the gown. It seemed poised on the pier, as though waiting for a second chance at a midnight rendezvous. "It's a beautiful piece. I hope it brings you peace and not regret." A breeze tousled Charlotte's curls. "Thank you. And thank you for your discretion. You must think it odd to bury family secrets in a dress lining. But I wanted that piece of the story to stay connected to the garment, like a time capsule." Harriet understood. "Would you like me to re-sew the letter inside the lining?" she ventured. Charlotte hesitated, then offered a gentle, sad smile. "No. That chapter should stay open now. It's time to let the past breathe a little. I'll keep the letter safe, but not hidden away." They stood together for a moment, the gulls' distant cries mingling with the soft lapping of water. The sun gilded their faces, and Harriet felt a sense of resolution. She sensed that Charlotte, by reclaiming the gown and the letter, would honor Grace's long-buried story in a quiet but meaningful way. A few days later, word spread that Charlotte had returned to her city home. Some folks whispered about her fleeting visit, but Harriet, bound by her sense of privacy, shared nothing. She carried on with her day-to-day tasks, hemming pans, repairing zippers, and finishing custom dresses. Yet she felt subtly changed. The brush with someone else's past had awakened in her a tenderness for second chances and the ephemeral nature of hidden histories. The next time Harriet ran into Lily, the pair greeted each other with a knowing look. Over tea at Lily's cozy librarian desk, they reflected on what they learned. "All those decades," Lily murmured. "The letter was waiting in that gown. It makes you wonder how many stories slip through our fingers, never to be told." Harriet nodded. "Part of me feels sad for Grace and Timothy. If they'd had more time, or more courage, who knows? But we can't alter the past. We can only try to preserve its lessons." As the days and weeks rolled on, Harriet's life in Clover Cove returned to its usual rhythms. She continued perfecting her stitches and welcoming customers with bright smiles. But occasionally, as she bent over a particularly delicate garment, she remembered the lines of that letter. "I can no longer hide my feelings. We must be together." She thought of the heartbreak it contained, and the unwavering devotion of a man named Timothy who waited under an old elm tree, night after night, for a beloved who never came. Even in the quiet hum of a small-town seamstress's life, Secrets occasionally slipped through the stitch. Harriet kept that knowledge close, resolving to handle each garment that crossed her threshold with renewed care, keenly aware that even the most unassuming piece of clothing might carry someone's untold story. And though her shop bell continued to ring with the typical flow of customers and repairs, Harriet held on to a small flicker of wonder at the hidden mysteries that can lie in a simple hem mysteries that bind the present to a past long thought forgotten.